Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and last night was the Campaign 3 wrap-up live stream, and it was able to answer a good deal of questions that we had throughout the campaigns, and certain questions were answered and certain weren't, which is a little upsetting because a lot of the times they would answer with, we want to let you guys fill in the gaps, but the reason we're asking the question is because we don't want to fill in the gaps. We want you guys to answer. However, that is not what we're going to talk about today. Today, I want to talk about something a little different, and it's based off a vibe that I got from Matt Mercer about Campaign 4. Multiple times throughout the wrap-up, there was questions that Matt would answer, basically saying we would like to explore that down the line. And a lot of these questions were basically set up for stuff that would happen closer to the end of Campaign 3 than I initially expected, which makes me believe we're going to have a campaign, the next campaign, be a lot closer to the beginning of the new era, so that they can explore different themes. One of them being like if the players choose to be a god or not, if they choose to be a reincarnated god and eventually have to learn who they are, which is really cool. However, this got me really thinking about the potential villains of Campaign 4, because if it's going to be closer to the end, it leaves a lot more room for there to be people who we got set up to, that if we were to jump 1,000 years into the future, like many people believed initially we might get. Now that's still possible, this is just a vibe that I got, and I might be alone in this vibe, but I do want to explore it just a little bit and talk about the potential villains of Campaign 4 if we are going to be setting it closer to the end of Campaign 3. So I guess this goes without saying, there is going to be some spoilers in here, so if you don't want spoilers, I recommend clicking off and, watching one of my other videos. Maybe watching my recaps so you don't get spoiled anymore for Campaign 3. I don't know. Spoilers. So when we talk about villains for the next campaign, there are some characters who I need to sort of eliminate right off the bat. And there are two of them specifically from Campaign 3 that I think deserve to be eliminated. The first one being Ludinus Deleth. So a lot of people would probably want Ludinus to be a villain in the future, especially if it's going to be so close to the beginning of this new era. So realistically, him wanting to kill the mortal gods sounds like it would be a good idea. However, according to Matt in his most recent fireside chat, he basically confirmed that the ending of him drinking tea in the Shattered Teeth was him accepting the fact that he won. He removed them from their pedestal and brought them back down low to be with the mortals. That was effectively his goal. His goal was to, in some way, shape, or form, to remove them from their pedestals high above and for them to be brought low. Whether that was to kill them or do what's happened to them now, he feels as though he has won. So unfortunately, I don't think Ludinus is a good character to have for a main villain of the next campaign. Not to mention he was mildly underwhelming when we met up with him, so just personal feelings on that one is he would be underwhelming again. However, I do think he'd be really fun for a one-shot for the Bell's Hells to wrap things up, or maybe even the Mighty Nine go and deal with him somehow in wherever his hidden laboratory is, so he can have a million of himself. But that's for future one-shot ideas, so I don't think that's something we need to worry about for Campaign 4 because he's basically done. So the next potential villain of Campaign 4 that I kind of want to remove from the listing is Delilah Briarwood. So the reason I need to remove her is because Matt confirmed during the wrap-up last night that basically Laudna and Delilah are intertwined now. The two cannot coexist without each other, or they can't exist without each other, they have to coexist. So for them to be separated or for Laudna to turn evil just doesn't seem like a possibility anymore. Especially with the soul gem sort of scenario that we have wrapped up with Delilah. Now, theoretically, could Delilah break out after Laudna were to die? She has a backup plan somewhere else that hasn't been totally used up yet? Maybe. But that's not until Imogen and Laudna die of old age at this point, which isn't going to be for another, 80 years for these characters. So the likelihood of that happening anytime soon or within the time frame of Campaign 4, if it is going to be set closer to the end of Campaign 3, isn't very high, unless someone just goes out and kills Laudna for some reason, but something tells me that's not going to happen. So unfortunately, Delilah Briarwood likely isn't going to be a villain in Campaign, 4. Maybe Campaign 5? Maybe. And, I could be wrong. There could be some sort of way that she breaks out and she is able to do something else. Maybe Matt changes his mind based off what he said, but I feel like it's pretty concrete that in the wrap-up, he's they cannot exist separately from each other. So, as for right now, there's likely no chance that Delilah can come back in any meaningful capacity. So now we can move on to characters who I think actually have a chance of being villains in the next campaign. Now, I don't think there's going to be one long overarching villain in this campaign. I think we're going to go back to the ways of the former campaigns where there's different, villains throughout the entire thing instead of just the one the whole time, or like the 2 or 3 the whole time. But with that being said, I think the Eidolons from Isilra, the little elemental spirits, could make for an interesting villain, especially if it's this close to the end of Campaign 3, where they could be pissed off that the gods, the people who destroyed their creators, are now walking amongst the people, and they could be trying to revolt and sort of, attack people again. I think that would be really interesting. We know that there is a dangerous capability to these creatures, but there's also a peaceful side, and we've realistically, for the most part, only seen that peaceful side. They helped guide the players while they were split in groups, and the team Isilra, they helped guide them towards the Archdruid that they needed to find so they could teleport back to Jushar. But they also helped them fight against, the Dawnfather's, soldiers while they're in that town. So realistically, we've seen both a violent side to them and a, nice and peaceful side to them. And apparently in the Reslayer's Take, they did also make an appearance where they just floated on by in front of them. So they do seem to have a peaceful nature to them, but I could very well see them being much like nature and the Wild Mother herself, where, nature can have mood swings and become evil and attack things if need be, if they feel threatened. So if the gods coming back threaten the Eidolons, I could very well see them potentially wanting to strike out against them and, sort of preemptively deal with this threat before they're taken out themselves again, because that's what happened to the Titans before. Maybe it'll happen now with the Eidolons. Who knows? I think it's very interesting, a possible idea, but I think that's why they're sort of lower on this list, because I think it's, lower end villainy stuff that we'd get at the beginning of a campaign before everything is nicely wrapped up in a bow and they're like, oh, we're not going to take you guys out this time, don't worry. So I've given a potential villain for one area that everyone wants to see in Isilra, but what about the other one, the Shattered Teeth? Well, I think we've known about who the potential villain for this area could be for a very long time, and that is Captain Novos, the undead, dwarf pirate captain in the Shattered Teeth, the, captain of the Crimson Abyss. And I think it'd be a lot of fun for, him to feel threatened by a bunch of people going into the Shattered Teeth, if they're going there to explore it and plunder and find awesome items that are there potentially. I could see it really, interesting story of him sort of trying to race to get his stuff back, because that's what he wants. He wants to collect his belongings. So for him to sort of go out and try to find this at the, the same time as other people are sort of racing out to find things in the Shattered Teeth would be a lot of fun. And I do think that it would be really interesting for him to be kind of a higher level threat in a early game, maybe level 5 or level 6, which would be a lot of fun for them, because it would mean he's a truly devastating threat. Though I believe the Bellshells were level 9, level 8 when they fought him, maybe even level 10, so it could be a bit of a difficult fight for them to deal with. But it would be really interesting for Novos to only send out 1 or 2 or 3 of his guys, and then the party have to deal with that, because they're a 7-man party, so they could, deal with some higher level stuff if it's in smaller numbers. So I do think it would be a lot of fun for them to sort of have this sort of rivalry with Captain Novos as they're sort of bouncing between islands, collecting stuff, and it'd be really fun for 1 minute to be like, oh, they're right next to where Captain Novos is sort of locked up, and then the islands to shift, and suddenly he's now miles away from them because he was, docked over there. So I think that would be a lot of fun for us to personally see, for him to sort of be this sort of threat throughout the entirety of whatever arc they're going to be doing in the Shattered Teeth, if they potentially do one there. So I think Captain Novos is basically just the perfect character to be a potential villain. Yes, we as, viewers, and they do as players, know that he's not that bad of a guy if you give him his shit, but new characters don't know that, and that would be metagaming. We don't want to metagame. We want to see Captain Novos be a vicious pirate undead skeleton. So the next group could, to me, be 50-50 on whether we see them or not, because I truly think, based off what was said during the live stream last night, there's a chance we don't see them for a while. So the next group is the Unseelie Court. Now, I believe the Unseelie Court is a group of characters who just always are trying to benefit themselves. They're always trying to improve their standings, always trying to, have a better life for themselves and be greedy in that sort of way. And, who fucking cares about other people? They want to do what they want to do. They want to have their control. So I do believe that there is obviously room for the Unseelie Court to be a villain in every campaign, but based off what Matt said last night, I think there's a good chance that their focus isn't on the material plane and is more so on Fern Calloway. And he basically hinted at the idea that he wants there to be a Fern-based one-shot in the future. So the likelihood of these guys being a villain after that for Campaign 4 seems a little, far out of reach, but I could definitely see some facets of them being villainous in campaign 4. But who knows? I would like to see them, and I would like for them to be sort of explored more in campaign 4, because we were supposed to get a lot more of that in campaign 3, but then it sort of shifted away from that, unfortunately, at certain points, which is upsetting. But I would very much like to see them get a stronger standpoint in campaign 4, if at all possible. So there's been a villain who's sort of been leaking his way into everything, or their way into a lot of things throughout the entirety of Critical Role, and that is the Chained Oblivion. I would love for this character to make some sort of a comeback, because in campaign 2 we had 2 different instances of this being, whatever the hell it is, seep its way into multiple arcs throughout campaign 2, and I would like for that to sort of happen again. And the Angel of Iron's cult was basically, a Chained Oblivion thing, and I think that was really interesting, really fun. But also, another thing that, the Chained Oblivion got its hands all over was Cognoza, the Cognoza Ward and Lucine and everything with the final arc of campaign 2. So it'd be really cool for stuff like that to happen again throughout the entirety of campaign 4, for us to slowly see different stuff like this sort of creeping up. And I would love to see the Chained Oblivion be like an actual final boss. And another thing that's really cool about the Chained Oblivion is they're based in the Abyss, a location that has gotten next to no representation in Critical Role. So it would be a lot of fun for them to actually go to the Abyss and potentially deal with the Chained Oblivion, a character who has been seeping their way throughout Critical Role history for ages. For 10 years, we've had stuff with the, the Chained Oblivion, and the gods even fear them. So I think it'd be a lot of fun, especially if a lot of the players end up being gods. For them to want to seek out the Chained Oblivion and deal with it in Mortal Coil would be a lot of fun. And I think that would be really cool for them to explore the Abyss. It would be very creepy, it would be very dark, and it could be an entire arc dedicated to itself, which would be nice if they do the whole separate arcs thing like they did in the previous campaigns. So I'd very much like to see that, but who knows? It's possible, maybe not. I would like to see it personally. The next character who I, would think would be a villain at some point down the line could also be a player, Vecna. So I think what's interesting about this character is, much like the other gods, Vecna was made mortal once again. So he has a second chance at life here, which isn't great, right? But that means if we are going to be closer to the end of campaign 3, it's likely that he'll be in his mid-20s, early 30s as a mortal, which I think is really interesting and really cool, and it could potentially be a player. But I think it'd be a lot of fun for him to sort of be like, okay, I have figured out who I am. I'm a powerful god. I'm a powerful lich. I am a genius. Time for me to take over the world. And, halfway through the campaign, we start, hearing of, this god or this character who could be Vecna doing stuff off in the distance. And then sort of toward the end of the campaign, oh shit, that is Vecna. We got to deal with that guy. I think that could be a lot of fun and would be really interesting, especially with the way that the gods are we will handle you again if we have to. Because basically Vecna's every mystery is a problem to be solved, and the Knowing Mistress is yeah, we'll deal with you again, motherfucker. We will take you out again if we have to. We will put you back in your prison, which I think is very interesting and very cool, and I would love to see something like that happen in this campaign, because it'd be nice. It would be, yes, a little referencey to past campaigns, which I know people might want to avoid, but I think a villain like this just makes sense to appear at some point, because he is just a bastard. He is just a villainous guy who wants to take over the world and, become a god, a powerful, almighty being. So for him to accept being who he is, especially because he knows the rights of becoming a god, so why wouldn't he want to reverse his, coil, right? He would want to become immortal yet again. Something tells me that there's a very good chance that he might want to reverse whatever the matron did at the end of campaign 3. Just saying, that's a possibility. And the last villain that we're going to be talking about today is one that has had some of the most insane buildup over the last 3 years that I think it's fucking ridiculous if we don't see him be a villain in some form or fashion. And that is Asmodeus. There is no chance he's not a villain in campaign 4. With the way that this motherfucker acts and everything that we've seen, EXU Calamity, Downfall, Divergence, even in campaign 3 itself, where he's I'm gonna kill you, Breus, I'm gonna come and find you, or we will deal with my siblings at some point, Breus, let's get them eventually. There's no fucking way he can't be a villain unless he's a player, which would be so interesting and so juicy story-wise. But There's no fucking chance this guy isn't a villain. He has been built up so perfectly, and yes, a lot of people would be like, well, leave that to Brennan. That's his thing. No. Matt needs to make him a campaign 4 villain. He's had way too much buildup. He's way too much of a bastard for him to not be. For what he did to Xerxes, for what he did to Trist, or, the Everlight, for what he's done to the characters in Divergence. There's no fucking way am I going to sit here and be like, we can't let him be a main villain of Campaign 4. He has to be. Especially after the way he talked at the end of Campaign 3 about finding his siblings and fucking killing them once and for all. He has to be a villain. There's just no other greater villain than the devil himself. Because that's effectively what he is, right? He is like the devil, right? In Critical Role, Asmodeus is the main, bad guy as far as I'm concerned. So for me, seeing him in Campaign 4 finally being represented as a villain, especially if other players are going to be gods, right? If there are going to be gods throughout the entire campaign, group, the party, it only makes sense for them to be like, our main villain is our brother. I think that's awesome, and it could be a super fun story for them to tell. So there you have it. The potential villains for Campaign 4 if it is set really close to the end of Campaign 3. That's just the vibe I got from Matt. I don't know. You guys might feel differently, but I truly think by the way he answered so many questions by saying, I would love to explore that with everybody, just makes me feel like there's too many things to explore to skip that far ahead in the future. If they were to skip 1,000 years, they would have to ignore all of these things that they would wish to explore. So, for me personally, I think Matt is very willing and potentially thinking about Campaign 4 being this early on. And I think it would be a lot of fun for us to see, especially because seeing the beginning of a new era is something that we just saw in Divergence, and it was super fun. And I would love to see that on a bigger scale than just 4 episodes. So personally, I think that would be a lot of fun for us to see a game this early, and these villains could facilitate that campaign. You could have all of them show up at some point. Maybe even Vecna and, Asmodeus work together. That would be a terrifying duo. But a lot of people also would like to see Campaign 4 be smaller in scale, so stuff like Asilra exploration and Shattered Teeth exploration still make a lot of sense. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. Do you like these villain choices, or would you like to see something completely new, which is likely what we're going to get because Matt is far more creative than I am. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys on Tuesday for whatever video I make next. Peace.